We do have Air Force One there on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews. The door is open. We are just waiting for President Trump to exit the plane and get into the beast, the motorcade here. So he is back from the NATO Summit. We want to, in just a moment here, bring into the conversation someone who covers the White House each and every day. Kind of good timing that we have this live picture. Let's bring him in now, actually. This is Christian Daytok, of course, friend of the program, reporter at the Washington Examiner, and Christian joins me. Christian, good to see you. We're not going to bring you on camera just yet because we have these live pictures. This is perfect timing. Trump is back in D.C. Let's, I think, first get to the NATO summit in general. NATO leaders today agreed on a massive hike in defense spending to 5% of GDP after pressure from President Trump. They expressed their, quote, ironclad commitment to come to each other's aid if attacked. Christian, you know more than most and better than most. This has been an issue President Trump has been campaigning on since he came down the gold escalator at Trump Tower. Isn't that right?
It is, and it's certainly an issue that he pressed for heavily during his first term in office and during those first few months of his second term as well. And I think it marks a pretty substantive change, not only in the way that Europe handles its own defense, but how some of these European leaders might have learned to handle Donald Trump himself. Now, I do think one of the interesting aspects to these developments is that the United States will not be joining on to that 5% commitment to spending on defense relating to Europe and other NATO members. But again, he's talking about the conflicts that obviously the United States is currently involved in the Middle East and potential tensions brewing in the South Pacific pursuant to China. So on the one hand, you've got the European leaders giving Donald Trump something that he wants in hopes that perhaps he scratches their backs in regard to Ukraine. And obviously, we've seen a shifting stance from President Trump regarding President Putin and Russia's ongoing aggression over the last several weeks or so.
So, Christian, what will the White House tout in the wake of the NATO summit? Is it just that key agenda item or anything else? What about the war in Ukraine? He met with Volodymyr Zelenskyy on the sidelines. What about that? What's coming out of that?
Well, there was one certainly development out of that meeting with President Zelenskyy, which I should note did not take place with reporters present. The White House had said that that was for operational and privacy reasons. But the president was asked about his meeting with President Zelenskyy during his press conference before departing the Netherlands. And he essentially said he is now considering sending more Patriot missile systems to Ukraine. This has been something that Zelenskyy has asked of President Trump since he entered office back in January. But the American president has been hesitant to provide because he wants to see this war wind down. But again, because of this ongoing aggression by Russia and the failure of President Putin to substantively come to the negotiating table on a ceasefire, I think you're seeing President Trump shift in his position. There was an extraordinary moment where a Ukrainian reporter who is currently living in Warsaw with her children asked the president a question on this topic, and he took a minute and, asked her about her story, asked about her husband, who is still back in Ukraine and is fighting for the defense of their homeland. So it's certainly a different position that President Trump is expressing on Ukraine compared to just a few weeks and certainly the early days of his second term in office.
Yeah, I mean, Christian, we brought you on today because we want to talk about the kind of conflicting reports coming from the intelligence community about the actual impact that the bunker buster bombs dropped from the B-2 bombers had on those 3 Iranian nuclear sites here. And this seems to be really a fixation amongst Trump White House officials and the president himself, so much so that he posted this while on the plane en route back to D.C. on Truth Social, saying this, that Secretary of Defense War, Pete Hegseth, together with military representatives, will be holding a major news conference tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Eastern at the Pentagon in order to fight for the dignity of our great American pilots. These patriots were very upset. After 36 hours of dangerously flying through enemy territory, they landed. They knew the success was legendary. And then 2 days later, they started reading fake news by CNN and the failing New York Times. They felt terribly. Fortunately for them, and as usual, solely for the purpose of demeaning President Donald J. Trump, The fake news, Times and CNN lied and totally misrepresented the facts, none of which they had because it was too soon. There were no facts out there yet, he says. The news conference will prove both interesting and irrefutable. Well, Fox News correspondent Rebecca Castor has a little bit more. Let's just watch this briefly.
President Trump is headed home from the NATO Summit in the Netherlands, but not before making it clear that Saturday's strikes on Iran's nuclear sites were successful.
The site is obliterated, and we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out.
Trump officials are pushing back on a leaked U.S. intelligence report suggesting the strikes did not destroy Iran's ability to create a nuclear weapon. Fox has learned that report is a preliminary low-confidence assessment based on just 1 day's worth of intelligence.
Those that dropped the bombs precisely in the right place know exactly what happened when that exploded. And you know who else knows? Iran. That's why they came to the table right away.
A lot of their above-ground facilities that are a critical part of a centrifuge program have been destroyed. And so a lot of what really is left is sort of what I call the residuals or the remnants of the program.
A nuclear deal with Iran could also still be on the table. Trump says the U.S. will be meeting with Iranian officials next week, although he's no longer insisting on an agreement.
To me, I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, they had a war, they fought, now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not.
Both the Pentagon and FBI are working to find the source of the leaked classified intelligence report. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Rebecca, thanks so much. Back here with Christian Daytalk. So, Christian, I have to ask this. Is the White House on the offensive about all of this? Has their language moderated at all? Are we still at obliterated when describing and characterizing the effect the bunker buster bombs had?
President Trump certainly isn't moderating his language, and the White House staff who I spoke to, and based on statements that they've put out publicly, they do not appear to be walking back from this line, criticizing CNN, the New York Times, and others for reporting about this DIA assessment that came out of the Pentagon. But I think it's important to note here, the truth is somewhere in the gray area. President Trump is arguing that these nuclear facilities have been completely obliterated. Certain satellite imagery and intelligence from the U.S., Israel, and our Five Eyes allies have corroborated part of that, but there's just no way to know if the entire underground facility at Fordo is obliterated until international inspectors go in there. And I do think it's interesting, again, the White House isn't disputing that this report was put out by the Pentagon, at least internally, but it is a win in that they get to flip this thing back on the press. They're saying that CNN, New York Times, again, the fake news, as the president puts it, they are denigrating these quote unquote patriots who flew this B-2 bombing mission, and they're arguing that they're trying to weaken the president's position. It's a familiar place that we're seeing. It's a familiar play that they're running, try and pit the public against the media when some of the situations that the president is handling aren't exactly coming to pass as he might have foreseen.
So, Christian, Jennifer Griffin has this reporting there for Fox at the Pentagon that this Defense Intelligence Agency assessment was preliminary, that it was, quote unquote, 1 day's worth of intelligence reporting. And we also heard from Tulsi Gabbard today, the Director of National Intelligence, indicating there is more intelligence on these strikes here. She said this, I'm going to read it in full, it's kind of long. She says, new intelligence confirms what POTUS has stated numerous times. Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed. If the Iranians chose to rebuild, they would have to rebuild all three facilities, Natanz, Fordow, Esfahan, entirely, which would likely take years to do. The propaganda media has deployed their usual tactic, selectively release portions of illegally leaked classified intelligence assessments, intentionally leaving out the fact that the assessment was written with low confidence to try to undermine President Trump's decisive leadership and the brave servicemen and women who flawlessly executed a truly historic mission to keep the American people safe and secure. So that's coming from DNI Gabbard. We also have yet another kind of corroborating statement from the CIA director as well, John Ratcliffe, saying he is confirming CIA intelligence which contradicts illegally sourced public reporting regarding the destruction of key Iranian nuclear facilities. And in Axios today, Christian, you alluded to this, that the Trump administration is planning to limit sharing classified information with Congress after someone leaked an internal assessment suggesting the bombings of the facilities were not as successful as President Trump claimed. So when I ask you about the White House going on the offensive, it seems like they're putting out all the stops to disabuse the press and the public of this notion that the bunker buster bombs had little to no effect, or we just can't know entirely for sure right this very moment.
Without a doubt, but I want to go back to DNI Gabbard's statement for a second. She talks about new evidence, but what's not in that statement that she puts out, what this new evidence actually is. And I understand that, classification law is playing a part here, but I just want to point to what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in the Netherlands earlier. He talked about how they had confirmed that this bombing run had taken out a conversion facility. That is a specific detail that we aren't hearing from some of these other administration officials. Look, ultimately, I think we're arguing semantics, right? We have 100% concrete proof that those B-2 massive ordnance bombs hit those 3 nuclear facilities. They have set back those programs for an undetermined amount of time, and we won't know exactly how long that window is, again, until international inspectors get in there. And so I think the president trying to say that the media is wholesale fabricating these reports is just not correct. Again, I think if you want to take a look in the mirror, if you're President Trump, he's thinking about his legacy. He has not been able to bring Iran to a new nuclear deal. He had hoped that Tehran might be more willing to negotiate after these strikes took place. And now he's saying, as he's departing the NATO summit, I don't care if we get a deal with Iran. Their facilities are destroyed and they do not have the capacity to acquire a nuclear weapon. He's trying to spin this into as big of a win as possible. And again, that's why you're seeing the all-out blitz against the media.
Yeah, I mean, Axios is reporting the FBI is investigating this leak out of the Defense Intelligence Agency. A senior White House official to Axios said, quote, "We're declaring a war on leakers." They said the intelligence community is figuring out how to tighten up their processes so we don't have deep state actors leaking parts of intel analysis that have low confidence to the media. And I've been stipulating that in our reporting. This DIA analysis was low confidence. It was a low confidence assessment. And it was just one agency out of 18 intelligence agencies in kind of the national security apparatus of the United States. So that's all important here. But are you or are people there in the White House concerned at all? Is there anyone there about the weaponization or politicization of intelligence matters?
I think they're certainly concerned about the politicization of the intelligence community, and this event itself doesn't necessarily start the beginning of that panic. I mean, again, it wasn't so long ago when we were on here talking about how Pete Hegseth was firing people left and right because they had leaked details about all of Signalgate. And again, you saw the president go after The Atlantic and Jeffrey Goldberg, slam them as fake news. And then eventually, once that story sort of died down a little bit, they moved on to the next scandal or the next crisis. That's just what this administration does. They see themselves in a hole, and in order to dig out of it, they'll go back and run the same plays that work with their base. In this case, try and push back against the idea that the media is covering this administration objectively. Again, it's never failed for Donald Trump to pit his supporters, pit the general Republican Party against the media, and that's what I see them doing right now.
But does President Trump have a point that low confidence intelligence assessment is undercutting the success of the mission?
I don't think so. I mean, again, I think it might be a different story if you're seeing Iran, mobilize military assets, but Tehran is signaling to the White House that they want to pick up the phone and resume negotiations. They might not get a deal by next week, but it doesn't appear, at least based on any early indications, that this situation will escalate. So as far as undermining the success of this mission, I think that's a place of perhaps fan fiction that the president is writing from right now, because again, he's trying to get this into as big of a win as possible, and he's trying to heal that rift within the MAGA caucus that is split on the question of potential new military intervention in the Middle East.
Yeah, I just want to put this up from Hugo Lowell there at The Guardian. He says Pete Hegseth says he launched another leak investigation with the FBI into the disclosure of classified reports saying limited damage to Fordow He says we're doing a leak investigation with the FBI right now because this information is for internal purposes and battle damage assessments here. So we'll just have to wait for more battle damage assessments and more intelligence on this. And of course, for this press conference tomorrow at the Pentagon with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and, in President Trump's words, other military advisors. What else do you have your eye on going into later this week, Christian?
It's hard to think about anything else right now, Andrew, okay. But I do want to talk about how important the next few weeks will be in regard to the president's hopes of signing that one big beautiful tax bill into law before July 4th. We've got, a Senate text, and we're awaiting a vote here soon before that package can get sent back to the House. And the White House, look, they're saying we do not care about recent events on the international stage. We want this bill signed by Independence Day, and it's up to Leader Thune and Speaker Johnson to make sure that gets done. That's what else I'll be watching. But again, it's hard to peel your eyes away from the conflict in the Middle East right now.
That is so true. Christian Daytalk, as always. Just thought of one more thing, something I'm watching July 9th. That's that deadline. 90 days will be up for all those trade deals. We'll have to check in on the progress on those. Christian, always good to see you.